Live in Canberra, where the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, is about to hold a news conference.
This is my first opportunity to acknowledge the remarkable life and incredible longevity and immense historical significance of Queen Elizabeth II, admired by so many Australians who have a genuine affection for her, and many of them would have tuned in to the funeral last night. We'll have an opportunity during Thursday's day of mourning and in the Parliament Friday to pay our respects to Her Majesty then as well. Today we wanted to talk to you about the budget, which is 5 weeks away today. We've got a fair bit to update you on. Katie and I will release the final budget outcome for last year, for 21-22, on Wednesday next week. But we wanted to give you an early and pretty comprehensive sense of that in advance. Katie also will give you a sense of what the spending pressures that we've been dealing with since the election look like, the ones that weren't budgeted for by our predecessors, whether it's COVID support, flood support, that's now running into the billions of dollars. Wednesday night next week, the fuel excise relief comes off, and I want to explain why prices shouldn't jump the whole 23 cents overnight. We're also supporting the G7 efforts to impose a price cap on Russian oil, and I want to spend a little bit of time briefly explaining why that's the case. When it comes to the final budget outcome for last year, the numbers are still being finalised for that, but we wanted to be upfront with people about what we're seeing in those numbers as they settle. The outcome will show that we've booked a substantial but temporary lift in taxes, and it will also show that billions of dollars that were promised weren't delivered, and much of that spending will spill over from last year into this year and into subsequent years as well. The budget deficit for 21-22 will show an improvement of almost $50 billion from what was expected at budget time. Just over half of that, around $28 billion, is from higher than expected revenues, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And the rest, around $20 billion, is from lower than budgeted payments. And what we know from the final budget outcome is that this substantial improvement is welcome, but the bulk of it is driven by temporary factors. On the revenue side, commodity prices remained higher for longer than expected over 21-22, but they've already begun to drop. To give you two examples of that, the 2-week average on the iron ore price is down more than 20% since the end of June. The 2-week average of the met coal price is down more than 25% since the end of June, and that gives you a sense of the temporary nature of this revenue boost. We've also seen a one-off boost in revenues from lower take-up of COVID business support measures, which has the effect of boosting revenues last year, but lowering them in the out years compared to what was expected because of the accumulation of the deductions that businesses accumulate. The large payment underspends are all about delays in COVID-related spending, including the procurement of vaccines and PPE, also delays in infrastructure spending arising from supply chain disruptions and industry constraints, as well as lower payments across health and social security as well. Now, as I said, we're still going through all of the details of this, and we will release the formal final budget outcome in the course of next week, on Wednesday of next week. But we wanted to give you a sense because a lot of the temporary improvement that we saw in 21-22 now becomes an issue for this government to deal with in 22-23 and beyond because of the over-promising and under-delivering on much of this funding that will be pushed out into subsequent years because of the inability to secure some of the particularly COVID-related spending. Some of that will be pushed out as well, and there are other issues at play which I've run through. Katie's going to give you a sense now of some of the pressures that we've already had to budget for since the conclusion of that budget year in June.